In this video, sometimes real strength isn't about defeating someone, it's about mastering your own darkness to protect an innocent life. This story teaches that one decision made with kindness and courage can change a whole life and even the future of the next generation.
The promise in the snow. The forest road was thin and pale under moonlight, as if the world had been rubbed with ash. Snow didn't fall in flakes that night. It drifted in slow, quiet sheets, soft as feathers, covering footprints almost as soon as they were made. The pines stood like patient witnesses, their branches heavy, their needles whispering whenever the wind moved through them. King Valerian Noctis walked alone. He didn't need a cloak to keep warm. Cold had stopped being an enemy centuries ago. Still, he wore one black velvet lined with silver thread, because the weight of it reminded him he had a body, a role, a name that the world feared enough to speak only in prayers or curses. They called him Vampire King like it was a title carved from bone, like it meant only hunger, darkness, the old stories people told their children to make them obey. In his castle, servants avoided his eyes. In villages, doors closed when shadows lengthened. Even the night seemed to step aside for him. And yet, on this road, Valerian's footsteps slowed as if he were afraid to arrive somewhere. He paused near a broken milestone buried in snow. The air smelled of pine sap and distant smoke, but there was another scent too: warmth, iron, life, human, close. His senses caught it before his eyes did. A heartbeat, uneven and fast, like a bird trapped in a small cage. Then a second rhythm beneath it, softer, delicate, insistent. A tiny pulse inside a pulse. Valerian's face tightened, not with hunger, but with something older and more dangerous: failing. Well, he turned his head and listened. A faint sound rose from the white silence. Not a scream, not even a cry, more like someone trying very hard not to make noise because making noise had never brought help before. Valerian followed it off the road, his boots sinking without effort, his movements smooth and controlled. The trees opened like curtains. There, half collapsed beside a fallen log, was a woman. Her coat was too thin for winter, and her hands were red with cold, fingers curled protectively around her belly. She was young, but exhaustion had drawn shadows under her eyes and sharpened the line of her jaw. A scarf covered her mouth, yet Valerian could see her lips tremble behind it. When she looked up and saw him, fear flashed through her like lightning. She tried to scramble back, but her body refused. Her breath came in shallow clouds. Her eyes, dark, wet, and stubborn, searched his face with the desperate calculation of someone who has learned to measure danger in seconds. Please," she whispered, and the word broke slightly on the air. Don't come closer." Valerian stopped at once, as if her voice had the power to command a king. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, showing he carried no weapon. "I won't harm you," he said. His voice was low, careful, chosen. "You're freezing, you need shelter." Her laugh was small and bitter. "Shelter," she echoed like it was a fairy tale word. "Men promise things when they want something." Valerian's throat tightened. The wind moved through the pines again, and he heard the tremor in her heartbeat, how it tried to be brave and failed. He heard the second rhythm too, the one inside her, innocent, unaware. He forced his gaze away from her neck, away from the places instinct wanted to go. Hunger was a storm he had learned to lock behind walls, but compassion could ruin him faster than thirst ever had. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated, like giving her name might give him power, but the cold was stealing her strength, 1 minute at a time. "Elara," she said, then swallowed. "Elara Vend." Valerian repeated it softly, as if honoring it. "Elara." She stared at him in confusion. Her eyes flicked to his pale skin, his too still posture, the way the moonlight seemed to cling to him. Then to his eyes, silver gray and watchful, not glowing with menace, but heavy with restraint. Her voice faltered. "I know what you think I am," Valerian said. He didn't deny it. He didn't soften the truth because lies were easy and he had lived too long on easy things. "And you have every reason to be afraid." Alara's hand tightened over her belly. "Then why are you here?" The simplest answer was that he could not ignore the sound of a mother trying to survive, but even that wasn't the whole truth. Valerian had made promises before, political promises, cruel promises, empty promises that kept the world arranged the way kings liked it. Those promises had cost people their hope. He had spent years telling himself hope wasn't his responsibility. Yet the tiny heartbeat inside Elara's body tapped at something in him he had buried. "I heard you," he said, and there was a quiet honesty in it that didn't ask for trust. "That's all." Elara's eyes narrowed, full of pain and pride. "If you heard me, then you also heard why I didn't call for help." Valerian studied her. There were bruises under the edge of her sleeve, old enough to have faded into yellow. Her boots were torn. The way she flinched wasn't just from cold. Someone had taught her that kindness came with a price. A long silence passed. Snow gathered on Valerian's cloak, melting without leaving wetness. He took one slow step forward, then stopped again, careful not to push her fear into panic. "If I come closer," he said, "it will be to lift you and carry you to warmth, nothing more." Elara's eyes shone with tears she refused to let fall. "Warmth doesn't last." Valerian felt the words land in him like a blade that didn't cut flesh, only memory. He remembered warmth too, human warmth, hands that once held his when he was still alive, before the curse, before the crown. He remembered losing it. He remembered what it had turned him into. He knelt in the snow at a respectful distance, lowering himself so he didn't tower over her. "Then let me make you a different kind of promise," Valerian said. Elara's breath caught. "A promise from you is worse than a threat." "That's fair," he replied, and there was humility in the way he accepted her judgment. "So don't believe it because I say it. Believe it because I will prove it." Her voice shook. "What promise?" Valerian looked at her belly, only slightly visible under layers, but unmistakable in the way she protected it. His expression softened, not like a predator noticing prey, but like someone standing at the edge of something sacred and terrifying. "I will get you through this night," he said, "and I will protect your child from anyone who tries to harm them, even if that person is powerful, even if that person is me." Elara stared, stunned by the last words. For the first time, her fear shifted shape. It didn't disappear, but it made room for something else. "A hope thin as a candle flame." "Why," she whispered, "why would a king like you care about my baby?" Valerian opened his mouth, and for once in centuries, he didn't know which truth was safe to speak. "Because I lost someone once, because I have done unforgivable things, because when I heard that second heartbeat, it felt like a door opening in a room I thought would stay locked forever." Instead, he said simply, "Because someone should." A gust of wind rushed through the trees, harsher now, bringing with it the smell of smoke, stronger, closer. Not from a distant chimney, but from torches moving through the forest. Elara smelled it too. Her head snapped toward the sound, panic flooding her face. In the distance, faint voices carried through the trees, men calling out not with concern but with ownership. "Elara," a voice shouted, "you can't hide forever." Her whole body went rigid, one hand still on her belly, the other gripping the snow as if she could anchor herself to the earth. "Oh, they found me," she breathed. Valerian rose slowly, the calm in him sharpening into something cold and controlled. His eyes lifted toward the moving lights between the trees. Elara looked up at him, trembling, and the fear in her voice was almost childlike. "If they see you, they'll kill you. Or worse, they'll make you kill me." Valerian's jaw tightened. The torches were closer now, flickering orange against the white snow. More voices, more footsteps, a hunting party. He turned back to Elara, and in that moment the air between them changed. The promise wasn't just words anymore. It was a line drawn in the snow. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "Can you stand?" Elara tried and failed, a small gasp escaping her as pain rippled through her. Valerian's hands hovered, giving her the dignity of choice even in terror. If I touch you, it will be to save you, he said, but you must decide now. The torches flared brighter through the trees. Elara looked at his pale hands, then at his eyes. Her lips parted, fighting the instinct to run from him, fighting the instinct to beg him. A shout cut through the forest, closer than before. There I see tracks. Elara's voice cracked, barely audible. If I trust you. Valerian leaned in just enough for her to hear him over the wind. Then I will carry the weight of that trust, he murmured, even if it destroys me. Elara's trembling hand lifted from her belly and reached toward him. And the first torchlight broke through the branches, painting Valerian's face in gold like a saint in a ruined church. One of the men gasped, "No." Elara froze mid-reach. A Valerian didn't move. Because in the same instant he smelled the men, he realized something that made his ancient blood run colder than snow. One of them carried a scent he recognized from his own castle. A royal hunter. A scent for him. Valerian's eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped to a whisper that Elara alone could hear. They didn't come for you, he said. They came because of me. Elara's fingers finally touched his sleeve. And the forest held its breath. Elara's fingers stayed on Valerian's sleeve, as if letting go would make her fall straight through the snow. Torchlight wavered between the trees, turning the drifting flakes into sparks, and the men's voices grew louder with every step. Valerian did not flinch. He simply shifted his body so he stood between Elara and the approaching lights, a quiet wall of black velvet and restraint. The wind tugged at his cloak, carrying the smell of smoke, wet leather, and metal warmed by hands that wanted control. "Can you crawl behind that log?" he asked softly, not looking away from the shadows. Elara tried to move and winced so hard her breath disappeared. "I can't," she managed, shame and pain mixing in her voice. I can't." Valerian's gaze flickered down to her belly, then back to the trees. He made a decision the way kings did, fast, final, and paid for later. "Then I will carry you," he said. Elara's eyes widened. "No, if they see you touch me, they'll say you." "They will say whatever helps them sleep," Valerian replied. His voice was calm, but something fierce lived underneath it, something that had nothing to do with hunger. "Look at me, Elara. You asked what my promise costs. This is it." He knelt, moving slowly enough that she could choose to recoil. He didn't grab. He offered his arms like a bridge. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Her gaze searched his face for the trick, the trap, the cruelty that always arrived after kindness. Valerian held still, his expression almost painfully controlled. "If you don't trust me," he said, "tell me now. I won't force you." The torches pushed closer, orange light leaking through the branches. A man laughed in the distance, sharp, confident, like he already owned the ending. Elara's chin trembled. Then she nodded once, small and desperate, and leaned into Valerian's arms. He lifted her with impossible gentleness, as if she were made of glass and breath. He cradled her close enough that her shivering began to slow, not because the air got warmer, but because something in him was steady, unmoving, certain. "Hold on," he murmured. Elara pressed a fist against his chest as if to remind herself he was real. Under his cloak he was cold, too cold, but his grip was careful, respectful, nothing like the men she feared. Valerian stepped backward into the deeper trees, not running. Running would look like guilt. He moved with quiet authority, placing each step where snow wouldn't crack, where branches wouldn't snap. He could vanish if he wanted to. He'd done it 1,000 times, but Alara's breath in his arms was loud, human, and fragile. He would not let her be the price of his escape. A voice rang out, clearer now, trained, carrying the hard confidence of someone used to obedience. "King Valerian Noctis," the voice called, "by order of the Crown and the Council of Dawn, you are commanded to surrender." Elara stiffened. "They know your name," she whispered into his cloak. "They're not just villagers." "No," Valerian said. His eyes flicked to the snow where their tracks might betray them. He hated the shape of this, how it tried to push him back into being a monster in a story told by other people. They are worse than villagers. Villagers fear what they don't understand. These men understand enough to enjoy it. He eased Elara down behind a thick pine whose low branches made a hidden hollow. He pulled his cloak around her, a dark curtain against white snow. Stay here, he said, his voice soft but absolute. No matter what you hear. Elara grabbed his wrist. Her fingers were numb, but her grip was fierce. You said you'd protect my child, don't leave me. Valerian looked at her hand on his skin. He didn't pull away. Instead, he covered her fingers with his own, sealing her fear between his palms like a fragile ember. I'm not leaving you, he said. I'm stepping away so they won't see you. Her eyes searched his, wet with panic. And if they make you... They can't, Valerian said, but the truth was more complicated than he let it sound. There were old laws, old bindings, old magic written into blood and title. Kings were not always free, even in their own kingdoms. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was only for her. Elara, listen. If I tell you to run, you run. If I don't come back in 1 minute, you run anyway. 1 minute, she echoed, horrified. That's an eternity for a man like me, he said, and something like sorrow touched his mouth. And it's too long for you. He turned away before she could see how much it cost him. Valerian stepped into the open. Torchlight slid over him, catching the silver thread in his cloak and the pale stillness of his face. The hunters stopped short, startled, not because they didn't expect him, but because he was exactly as the nightmares promised, and nightmares were always smaller when told by firelight, larger when standing in front of you. 5 men formed a half circle. Their boots crushed snow with deliberate heaviness. They wore thick coats and carried crossbows and iron-tipped spears, nothing raised yet but everything ready. The one who had spoken stood in front, tall, clean-shaven, with a polished badge on his chest. His eyes were pale and steady. A royal hunter. Valerian recognized him now, not by face, but by scent and posture and the way power sat on him like armor. Captain Soren Hale, Valerian said quietly. Soren's mouth tightened at hearing his name. So you do remember the house that fed you. Valerian's gaze did not waver. I remember every house that fed me, and every house I burned afterward to prove I was worthy of fear. The words landed like a confession thrown at their feet. One of the hunters shifted, unsettled. Soren did not. You've grown poetic, Soren said. Maybe regret is finally making you civilized. Valerian's eyes narrowed. You didn't come to discuss my character. Soren lifted a parchment sealed with red wax. By decree, you are to be taken to the cathedral keep, bound and judged for the crimes of your line. Valerian's expression didn't change, but inside him something tightened. Cathedral keep, the place of sunlight and chains, a place designed to break what he was, slowly, publicly, as a lesson. And if I refuse, Valerian asked. Soren's gaze flicked past Valerian into the trees, searching. Then the price will be paid in other blood. Elara's breath caught behind the pine, and Valerian felt it like a thread pulled tight. His voice lowered. You followed me for months. You chose this road. Tell me the truth, Soren. Who is the other blood? Soren's smile was thin. Do you truly want to pretend you care about humans now? Valerian took one step forward, not threatening but heavy with meaning. Answer me. Soren held his ground. A woman has been reported fleeing her lawful husband, a pregnant woman at that. The council believes she carries a complication. The word struck with cold precision. Elara. Valerian's eyes sharpened, his control suddenly becoming something more dangerous than anger. Clarity. Oh, you used her as bait, Valerian said. We used the truth, Soren corrected. A runaway, a criminal, and you drawn to the scent of fresh life like you always are. Valerian's jaw flexed. The old story wanted to swallow him, monster drawn to innocence. He hated how easy it was for them to make the world believe it. Elara's voice, faint but fierce, trembled from her hiding place. I'm not a criminal. One of the hunters snapped his head toward the sound. Valerian moved faster than thought, not with violence but with placement. He stepped into the line of sight, blocking it, absorbing attention like a curtain pulled across a window. Soren's eyes narrowed, so she's here. Valerian's tone was calm, but every word carried the weight of a vow. She is under my protection. A low laugh moved through the hunters, nervous and disbelieving. Soren lifted a hand, silencing them. Protection, he repeated. From what, her husband, the village, the winter? He leaned forward slightly, eyes glinting in torchlight. Or from yourself? Valerian did not answer at first. He could have said, I won't harm her. He could have said, I'm different. But he'd lived long enough to know that promises were cheap unless you paid for them. Instead, he said, from you. The air went still. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Soren's voice turned quiet, almost conversational. Then you'll come with us. Valerian's eyes flicked toward the pine hollow where Elara hid under his cloak. He imagined her trying to stand. Imagined her running, leaving a trail in the snow. Imagined men laughing as they followed. He swallowed something bitter. You want me chained, Valerian said slowly, so you can do whatever you like to her. Soren's expression didn't change. That was answer enough. Valerian's hands curled at his sides, then relaxed again. His restraint was not weakness. It was a choice made every second. He stepped closer to Soren until the captain could feel the cold rolling off him like night air from a tomb. You will not touch her, Valerian said. Soren's eyes hardened. You don't get to command me, creature. Valerian breathed in and the world sharpened. He didn't show teeth, he didn't lunge. He simply let his presence expand, ancient, heavy, royal, until the hunters unconsciously shifted their feet as if the ground itself had changed under them. I am Valerian Noctis, he said, voice low and steady. I have been called monster, tyrant, curse. Tonight, call me what you like, but understand this. He took one more step, close enough that Soren's torchlight trembled from the change in air. If you force me to choose, Valerian whispered, I will choose the mother. Behind the pine, Elara pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears slid silently into her scarf, not from sadness alone, but from the terrifying sweetness of being chosen, truly chosen, by someone she had every reason to fear. Soren's gaze flicked again toward the hiding place. Then let's test your new mercy. He raised his hand. Two hunters immediately fanned out, boots crunching, angling toward the pine hollow. Valerian's heart, if it could be called that, seemed to stutter, not from fear for himself, but from the sudden, unbearable image of Elara's face when those men found her. He could stop them, but stopping them would reveal what he truly was, and once the village heard, once the council saw, there would be no safe road left for Elara. Not anywhere. Valerian stood between two impossible choices, and for the first time in centuries, his voice broke, not loudly but in the smallest crack of pain. Elara, he called just once softly. Her name floated into the snow like a prayer. Soren watched Valerian's face with satisfaction, as if he'd been waiting for that one human sound to escape him. There it is, Soren murmured, the weakness. Valerian's eyes went to the pine. The hunters were almost there. And under the cloak, Elara's breath suddenly hitched, sharp, involuntary, followed by a quiet, strangled gasp. A new sound joined the night. Not fear, not footsteps, a low, wet, unmistakable moan of pain. Valerian's head snapped toward her, every muscle in him going still. Elara's voice came out thin and shaking. Valerian, she whispered, I think the baby is coming. The torches burned brighter as the hunters closed in, and Valerian realized with cold certainty that whatever happened next would either save them both or end the last gentle thing he'd tried to become. Elara's whisper didn't just reach Valerian's ears. It struck some deep, buried place in him where old vows and old grief had been sleeping for centuries. I think the baby is coming. For half a second, the world narrowed to that sentence. The snow, the torches, the iron on the hunter's weapons, even Captain Soren's smirk, all of it became distant like noise outside a closed door. A Valerian moved. He didn't leap at the men, he didn't bare fangs or spill violence into the night. He did something far more unsettling to them. He became calm. He lifted one hand, palm outward, and spoke with quiet authority that carried like a bell in cold air. Stop. Two hunters hesitated without knowing why. Their boots stilled mid-crunch. Their eyes flicked to Soren for permission to continue. Soren's face hardened, annoyed at their hesitation. Move, he snapped. Valerian's voice turned softer, almost gentle, and that gentleness carried a threat not of harm, but of certainty. If you take one more step toward her, you'll be stepping into a promise you cannot undo. Soren scoffed, but he didn't send them forward again. Not yet. He watched Valerian as if trying to solve a puzzle he didn't want to believe had changed shape. You're bargaining, Soren said. Interesting. Valerian didn't answer. He angled his body toward the pine hollow, never taking his eyes off Soren. Elara, he called again, low and steady. Breathe with me, in, out, slow. A tremor answered from the branches. I can't. Yes, you can, Valerian said, and something in his tone made the words land like a hand on a shoulder. You've been enduring pain longer than tonight. This is only a new kind of strength. Soren laughed once, sharp. You think you can play midwife now? You can't even stand sunlight. Valerian's eyes flashed, not with rage, but with a worn, bitter truth. Sunlight never judged me, people did. Soren stepped closer, boots biting snow. Enough philosophy, come with us. The woman will be handled by her husband. The child, if it survives, will be assessed by the council. The casual cruelty of the sentence hit Valerian like a slap, not because it was loud, but because it was normal to them. Elara is not property, Valerian said. She is under law, Soren replied, and you are under sentence. Valerian exhaled slowly. Then he made a choice so clear it felt like the night itself rearranged around it. I will surrender, he said, on one condition. Soren's eyebrows lifted. You're in no position to. One condition, Valerian repeated, and the hunters' torches fluttered as a gust of wind passed that hadn't existed a moment earlier. You turn around, you walk back to the road, you wait 10 minutes. Soren stared, so you can run. So she can live, Valerian said, voice steady. She is in labor. A flicker passed through the hunters, uncertainty, discomfort, maybe a trace of human decency fighting its way through their orders. One man swallowed hard. Another looked away as if he'd suddenly remembered a sister, a wife, a mother. Soren did not soften. If she's in labor, she should be with women, with a village, not with you. Valerian's gaze stayed on Soren, but his next words were meant for the men behind him. Is there a woman among you? A silence. Is there anyone here trained to deliver a child in the snow? No one spoke. Valerian nodded once, as if concluding what he already knew. Then you will wait, he said. If you don't and she or the child dies, their blood won't stain my hands, it will stain yours. Soren's jaw worked. For the first time, his confidence wavered, not because he cared, but because Valerian had dragged the situation into daylight where even monsters could be measured by outcomes. Soren turned his head slightly, speaking to his men without taking his eyes off Valerian. Circle wide, don't approach, but don't let them leave. Valerian accepted it. It was not mercy. It was calculation, but it was time. He moved back to the pine hollow, lowering his body into the hidden space. Inside, Elara lay half-curled, his cloak wrapped around her like a night sky trying to keep her warm. Her face was pale with pain, lips pressed tight, eyes glossy with terror and determination. When she saw him, relief and panic collided. They're still there, she whispered. I know, Valerian said. He knelt beside her, careful, respectful, keeping his hands visible. You're not alone. Elara gripped the edge of his cloak. I don't know how to do this. Valerian's expression shifted, something like sorrow, something like reverence. Neither do I, he admitted quietly, but I will not abandon you. Her eyes searched his face. Why are you doing this? Tell me the real reason. Valerian's throat tightened. The answer rose like a confession he'd avoided for centuries. Because once, he said, voice barely above the wind, someone begged me for kindness, and I was too proud, too hungry, too convinced I was beyond saving. He swallowed. I have heard that voice in my head for a very long time. Alara's breath shook. And you think saving me will? I don't know what it will do, Valerian said, but I know what failing you would make me. Another contraction seized her. She gasped, body arching, a raw sound of pain that made Valerian's hands curl into fists against the snow, helplessness burning through his discipline. Breathe, he reminded her low and steady. In, out, look at me. Elara did, tears slid down her temples into her hair. I'm scared. I am too, Valerian said, and the honesty in it shocked them both. Kings did not admit fear. Monsters did not admit tenderness, but he did. Not of the hunters, of losing you, of failing your child. Alara's eyes widened at that, at the you, not just the baby, her voice cracked. No one has said that to me. Valerian hesitated. Then slowly he placed two fingers against her wrist, feeling her pulse. Human, fierce, alive, then hear it now. He listened not for blood, but for rhythm, for strain, for the way her body fought to bring life into the world. He could hear the second heartbeat too, fluttering like a trapped bird. A thought came, sudden and sharp. Elara, he said, when this started, did you feel something tear, any bleeding? Oh, she shook her head quickly, panicked. No, just pain. He nodded, relief threading through him. Goods, then we breathe and we endure. Outside the hollow, Soren's voice carried through the trees. Time S running out Noctis. Valerian ignored him. Minutes stretched, thick with breath and snow and Elara's trembling strength. Valerian spoke to her between contractions, not with grand speeches, but with small anchors. Oh, your name, he said once when she seemed to drift. Say your name. Elara, she whispered. And you are here, he said. You are here, you are alive, you are doing this. Her fingers dug into the fabric of his cloak. Valerian, if I die. You won't, he said, but he couldn't offer certainty. So he offered something else, something stronger than certainty. If the worst happens, he said quietly, I will raise your child with truth, not with fear, not with the lies they tell about you. I will tell them you were brave. I will tell them you loved them before you ever saw their face. Elara stared at him, trembling. A vampire king raising a human child. Valerian's mouth tightened. It would be the first honest thing I've ever done with my power. The words hit Elara like warmth. She sobbed once, a small broken sound that turned into resolve. Then at last the rhythm changed. The pain came sharper, closer, different. Elara's body tensed with a terrible knowing. She gasped, it's now. Valerian's senses sharpened. He forced his own breath to slow, to stay steady for her. He adjusted the cloak beneath her, making a clean, warm enough nest out of darkness and snow. Hold my arm, he said. Crush it if you need to. Elara gave a strangled laugh through tears. You don't feel pain. I feel this, Valerian said, and he meant it. She gripped him, and when the next wave hit, she bore down with everything in her. Valerian murmured instructions the way he'd once murmured commands to armies, focused, precise, unwavering. Now, he said, again, you're doing it, you're doing it. Outside, Soren's boots crunched closer. Noctis. Valerian didn't look up. You will not come nearer, he said, voice low but carrying. Not if you want her to live. Soren hesitated, frustrated, and Valerian felt the line holding for now. Elara cried out, and then a new sound cut through the night. A thin, startled wail, small, furious, alive. Valerian's entire body went still. For a moment, he forgot he was hunted, forgot he was cursed, forgot the shape of himself as a creature of night. All he could hear was the impossible insistence of life. Elara's chest heaved as she reached with trembling hands. She couldn't finish. Valerian lifted the baby carefully, wrapping them in his cloak, shielding them from the bite of air. The newborn's skin was flushed, their tiny fists clenched like they were already ready to fight the world. It's a girl, Valerian said softly, voice rough with something that sounded dangerously like awe. Elara made a sound between a laugh and a sob. A girl. Her eyes fixed on the bundle in Valerian's arms. Let me please. Valerian leaned closer and placed the baby against Elara's chest. The child quieted slightly, soothed by her warmth and heartbeat. Elara's face crumpled as she held her daughter, tears spilling freely now. I thought I'd never get to meet you, she whispered. I thought they'd take you. Valerian watched them, and something in his expression broke open, an ancient loneliness finally meeting a purpose it could not swallow. What will you name her? He asked. Elara looked up at him, exhausted, radiant in the smallest way, like a candle that refuses to go out. I don't know. A pause, then she said, What's the name of the first star that appears at dusk? Valerian blinked. The question pulled him back through centuries of night skies. In old tongues, he said, we called it Astra. Elara smiled faintly. Then she's Astra. The baby made a small sound like she approved. Outside, Soren's voice cut in again, colder now. Enough, bring the woman out. Valerian's gaze lifted, returning to the world of torches and laws and men who confused power with righteousness. He stood slowly, cloak wrapped around Elara and the child, shielding them both. He stepped out of the hollow. The hunters stiffened at the sight. Even Soren's face flickered just once as he registered the reality. The woman had delivered. The child existed now, undeniable, not rumor or bait, but a living person. Elara clutched Astra to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. She pressed her cheek to the baby's head as if she could merge their bodies and make them harder to steal. Valerian stood beside them, slightly in front, his posture calm but absolute. Soren's gaze locked on the baby. That child must be examined. Elara shook her head violently. No, no. Valerian spoke before Soren could step closer. If you touch her, he said, you will be touching someone under my protection. Soren's eyes narrowed. Your protection is meaningless against decree. Valerian's expression did not change, but his voice softened in a way that made the threat worse, not better. I am not offering you a fight, Soren. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away and live as the man you pretend to be. Soren smiled thinly, and if I do... Valerian lifted his chin slightly. Then I will surrender, he said, and you will let them go. Soren blinked. You'll trade yourself for them. Yes, Valerian said. Bind me, take me to your cathedral keep. Tell your council the monster has been delivered to their door. Elara's head snapped toward him. Valerian, no. He didn't look at her yet. If he did, he might not be able to do it. You need a chance, he said quietly. A road that isn't tracked by my name. Soren's eyes glittered with victory. Finally, sense. Valerian raised one hand. But understand the other half of the bargain, he said. If you lie, if you follow them, if you harm them, I will not need to be free to keep my promise. Soren's smile faltered just a fraction. Because the worst fear powerful men carry is not being attacked. It is being remembered. Valerian turned to Elara then. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw something no one else ever saw. Not hunger, not royalty, but a man who had been lost so long he'd forgotten what it meant to choose goodness. Elara, he said very softly, listen to me. Elara clutched Astra tighter. Don't do this. You asked me why I cared, Valerian said. This is my answer. Her tears fell onto the baby's blanket. We can run, you said you could vanish. Valerian gave a faint, sad shake of his head. They would chase you forever. They would make your daughter grow up hunted. I will not give her my curse as an inheritance. Elara's voice broke. Then what am I supposed to tell her when she asks who saved us? Valerian's throat tightened. He looked down at Astra's tiny face, wrinkled, perfect, furious at the cold world. Tell her, he said, that the night is not evil just because it is dark, and that sometimes the darkest man in the story is the one who finally learns to carry a light. Elara shook her head, sobbing, I don't want a story, I want you alive. Valerian reached out slowly and touched Astra's blanket with 2 fingers, barely there, reverent. So do I, he whispered. Soren stepped forward, impatient now. Enough, the deal stands. Valerian didn't look away from Elara. It stands. Soren motioned and 2 hunters approached with iron cuffs. Elara flinched, but Valerian didn't resist. He held his hands out himself. The iron clicked shut. Elara made a sound like she'd been stabbed. Valerian. He leaned closer just once and spoke so only she could hear. Go to the river road, he murmured. There's a stone bridge with a carved moon. Under it, at the 3rd pillar, you'll find a silver ring. Take it to Sister Marin at the chapel in Briar Hollow. She owes me a debt she never repaid. Elara stared. You planned this. Valerian's mouth tightened. I learned long ago to plan for endings. Soren tugged the chain, and Valerian's shoulders shifted with the pull. Still, his gaze stayed on Elara. Run, he said, voice steady. Not because you're weak, because you're brave enough to keep living. Elara's feet moved as if the snow pushed her. One step, then another. She backed away, sobbing silently, Astra pressed tight to her chest. The hunters watched her go, but Soren lifted a hand, holding them to the bargain. Elara turned once, desperate, and Valerian met her eyes. He did not smile. He gave her a small nod, one last piece of strength handed over without words. Then Soren jerked the chain again. Move. Valerian walked. Torches surrounded him, hemming him in like a moving cage. The forest swallowed their footsteps as they headed toward the road, toward the cathedral keep, toward whatever the council planned to do with a king who had refused to be a monster on schedule. Elara disappeared into the trees, her breath ragged, her daughter's tiny noises guiding her like a fragile compass. And for a few minutes, it seemed the bargain had held. Until Soren, walking beside Valerian, leaned in and murmured with quiet satisfaction, You think you bought their freedom, but you gave me something better. Valerian's eyes slid to him. What? Soren's gaze flicked toward the dark path Elara had taken. Hope, people follow hope, people talk about hope. Valerian's voice turned dangerously soft. You said you would let them go. I did, Soren replied, for now. Valerian stopped walking. The hunters tugged the chain. Keep moving. Valerian didn't. He stared into the trees like he could see through them, like he could see the future trying to close its fist around Elara and Astra. Then, in the stillness, he did something no one expected. He lowered his head. Not in defeat, in humility. In prayer, if a creature like him was allowed to pray. And when he lifted his gaze again, it held a decision that terrified even Soren. You wanted me to surrender, Valerian said. Fine, but understand this, Captain. Soren frowned. What? Valerian's voice was barely above the crunch of snow, yet it carried like a vow carved into stone. I made a promise to a mother, he said, and I have learned something tonight. The hunters tightened their grip on their weapons, unsettled by his calm. Soren forced a laugh, and what is that? Valerian took a slow breath, as if tasting the night one last time. That I do not need a crown, he said, to be a king. He turned his cuffed hands slightly, and the silver thread in his cloak caught torchlight, revealing, for the first time, fine symbols stitched into the lining. Old symbols, not magic to harm, but bindings designed for one purpose. To break bindings. Asarin's smile vanished. What did you do? Valerian looked past them, toward the direction Elara had fled. I gave her 10 minutes, he said, and I gave myself a new law. The iron cuffs creaked, not snapping with brute force, but loosening as if the lock had simply decided it no longer had authority. The hunters staggered back, shocked. Valerian stepped out of the chain's pull free. He didn't attack, he didn't lunge, he didn't revel. He simply turned to Sorin, eyes like winter moonlight. You can tell the council whatever story you like, Valerian said, but the truth is this. He pointed into the forest, the gesture not violent but absolute. I am going after them, he said, not to feed, not to conquer, to guard. Azarin's voice rose, furious. Stop him. The hunters raised weapons, but Valerian didn't rush them. He stepped backward into shadow, and the shadows accepted him the way water accepts rain. His form blurred into the dark between pines. A last sentence drifted back, quiet as falling snow. And if you follow, Valerian said, bring every torch you have. The forest swallowed him whole. Far away, Elara stumbled toward the river road with Astra pressed to her heart, her tears freezing on her cheeks. Behind her, the trees groaned softly in the wind. Then she heard it, footsteps that were not heavy like the hunters, not frantic like hers. A smooth, controlled, keeping pace at a distance, not chasing, guarding. Elara stopped, trembling, and turned her head. Between the pines, a pale figure stood half hidden by night, watching the path behind her instead of watching her throat. Valerian lifted one hand, not to summon her back, but to tell her something without words. Go. I'm here. Alara's knees nearly buckled with relief. She looked down at Astra, who blinked up with unfocused newborn eyes, then back at the dark figure who had chosen them over his own freedom. And as Elara ran toward the bridge with the carved moon, the vampire king followed like a shadow with a heart, silent, patient, unbreaking, keeping his shocking promise not for glory, but because one tiny human life had finally taught him how to be good. The night did not feel empty anymore. It felt like it was beginning.